Outwardly, it was his biggest achievement. But on his deathbed, almost none of that mattered. In the remaining few days, as his breathing slowed and became guttural, all that dominated his thoughts were the people who'd been part of his life. My mum, me and my siblings, his family and friends. As we flitted around his bedside like moths, taking turns to stroke the back of his hand or moisten the inside of his mouth with a tiny wet sponge, he revisited stories of adventures and holidays, family birthdays around the dining table, personal and sporting achievements, and time spent on the ride-on lawnmower at his beloved farm. Work hardly rated a mention. All those promotions, late-night emails, corner offices and pay rises won't mean a damn thing when you're on your deathbed, holding the hands of your loved ones as you wheeze your final breath. The loss of a parent feels like being violently knocked off a bike that you've spent your whole life learning to ride. When you finally pick yourself back up, you realise one of the handlebars, something you assumed would always be there, is missing. It takes some practice and many more falls to learn how to ride properly again. But eventually you get back up and balance, moving forward on a bike that will never be the same. The years leading up to my dad's inevitable death ignited something deep inside me as I sorted through fresh memories, earmarking those to keep. He lived an extremely full life, balancing work while fostering deep relationships, pushing his own body and mental capacity right up until the end. Any death is a sobering moment for those lucky enough to still live, a time to stop and reassess, spending quiet moments in reflection to confirm that your values and priorities are aligned with the direction you want to go in. For years, I'd had a gnawing sensation that something wasn't quite right with the way we are living and working. I'd begun working full-time in the mailroom of an advertising agency, straight out of school, before co-founding my first digital media title with friends in my mid-20s. Over the next 15 years, I gave everything I had to work, helping to build a business with 60 full-time staff, a company we sold in 2016 and I left in 2020. Inspired by the sense we were in the middle of a momentous shift in the way we work, supercharged by the global pandemic, I began experimenting with different ways of living and working. First, I experimented with location, spending 6 months working out of a motorhome as my husband and I drove to the sunburnt edges of Australia. We mixed up the usual Monday to Friday schedule, packing as much work as we could into the first few days of each week, leaving the rest of the time free to do what gave us joy, like travelling, exploring, hiking, cooking, reading and snorkeling. Luckily, my husband's job, like mine, could be done from anywhere with a PowerPoint and an internet connection. And we soon swapped our camper van for 6 months living in Australia's top end, basing ourselves in Darwin. Each working day, we'd dial into video calls from our sun-soaked apartment, then close our computers and spend the afternoon in the pool or at the local swimming hole to cool down. But the biggest experiment of all came in 2021, when we moved to Europe to combine travelling and working into one occasionally messy but always glorious journey. We crawled through Greece, Israel, Mexico and Finland before making a home on the Spanish island of Majorca. Here, we wake up early a few mornings to communicate with Australia during the time zone crossover, and then have several precious hours of deep, productive thinking before knocking off for a late lunch, a siesta, or an afternoon swim in the Mediterranean. I acknowledge the enormous privilege I have in terms of financial and travel freedom. I've sold several businesses and I don't have any children. But my own journey is just a starting point for the ideas explored in this audiobook through the perspectives of scores of people you're about to meet. It took me a long time and many different experiments to learn my ideal way of living and working. And that discovery has redefined the role work plays in my life. The happier I felt experimenting, the more obsessed I became with understanding why it took over 2 decades to find a way through the noise and make work finally work. I started seeking out others who were also experimenting with different ways of working and living, emboldened by an unprecedented opportunity to bend the rules